It was just after 7:30 on a gray Wednesday morning. Traffic was steady, nothing out of the ordinary. A patrol unit clocked a sedan weaving slightly across the center line, enough for a routine stop. The officer activated his lights, pulled behind the vehicle, and approached the driver's side window. What followed has since been described as one of the most disturbing discoveries in the department's recent memory. The driver, a man in his early 40s, appeared calm, cooperative. He answered questions, handed over his license, nothing erratic, no signs of distress. But then the officer glanced toward the back seat. There was a large object, partially concealed under a blanket. No movement, no sound, just a pale hand sticking out from underneath the fabric. What started as a simple traffic stop turned into a crime scene. Backup was called. The man was asked to step out of the vehicle. He complied, but said very little. When officers lifted the blanket, they found the lifeless body of a woman. Head injuries, bruising, cold to the touch. She wasn't a stranger. She was his wife. Within minutes, the roadside turned chaotic. Squad cars, flashing lights, crime scene tape, passersby slowing down, trying to catch a glimpse of what had gone so terribly wrong. But what no one could have known, not then, was how many questions this discovery would raise. Why was he driving with her body in the car? Where was he going? What had really happened inside their home just hours earlier? The husband didn't run. He didn't lie. At least, not right away. He just stood there, waiting. What led to this moment? What drove a man to such a quiet, horrifying act? Wasn't immediate. It didn't explode in a flash of rage. It built over time. And if you look closely at the days, the months, even the years leading up to that morning, there are signs. Subtle ones, easy to miss, but they were always there. Emily Hartwell was 36 years old, a teacher, a mother, known for her kindness, her patience, and the way she could calm even the most troubled kids with a single look. She lived in a quiet neighborhood in Brookhaven, a town that hadn't seen a murder in over a decade. Her husband, Daniel, was an operations manager at a packaging facility just outside the city. By most accounts, he was friendly, reliable, maybe a little withdrawn, but never threatening, never dangerous. They had been married nearly 9 years. Friends described them as private but solid. No obvious cracks, no public drama. But Emily had stopped posting photos. She'd pulled back. Some noticed, others didn't. Now her body was lying in the back seat of Daniel's silver sedan, motionless, broken. And Daniel? He wasn't pleading innocence. He wasn't saying much of anything at all. This case would go on to unearth years of silent tensions, disturbing journal entries, and a deeply unsettling question: how close can you really be to someone without ever knowing what they're capable of? Over the next hour, we'll trace the final 48 hours before Emily's death, analyze what investigators uncovered inside the Hartwell home, and reveal the chain of events that ended in one of the most chilling arrests ever made on the side of a suburban road.
The signs were there. This is what they missed. Emily and Daniel Hartwell met in the fall of 2011, a small college event. She was in her final year of grad school, studying education. He worked IT support. She forgot her password. He reset it. That was how it started. 6 months later, they moved in together. 2 years after that, they were married. The wedding was modest, family only, in the backyard of Emily's parents' home in Chester County. She wore a short lace dress, he wore a borrowed suit. They looked happy. If you found this story gripping, make sure to like and subscribe for more in-depth true crime stories and investigations. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Share this video with friends who love unraveling real crime mysteries. And if you or someone you know is facing domestic violence, don't hesitate to seek help. There are resources available, and you're never alone. Together, let's raise awareness and keep the conversation alive. Okay, let's continue the story. At least in the photos, they bought a small colonial outside of Brookhaven. 3 bedrooms, white siding, blue shutters. A quiet cul-de-sac. Children played outside. Everyone waved. If there were issues inside the Hartwell house, no one on the outside knew. Emily taught 2nd grade at Westland Elementary. She was the kind of teacher parents requested, the kind of person who remembered every child's birthday. One colleague said, "Emily lit up that whole hallway. If she was ever having a bad day, no one could tell." Daniel, by contrast, kept to himself, worked long hours, rarely attended school functions or neighborhood events. He wasn't rude, just reserved. Emily often came to gatherings alone, always with a polite smile and a reason why Daniel couldn't make it. They didn't have children, though sources close to the family say they tried. At one point, fertility treatments were mentioned, briefly, quietly, then never brought up again. In public, they were pleasant, ordinary, safe. But not everything added up. Emily stopped attending her monthly book club in early 2022. She pulled back from social media. Her Instagram went from frequent updates to silence. She deleted Facebook entirely. A neighbor recalls seeing her walking late at night, alone, even in the cold, sometimes with headphones in, sometimes just pacing the sidewalk. She never said why. Daniel, meanwhile, had started working from home. He said it was because of COVID protocols. But according to his employer, those had long since been lifted. He rarely left the house. Sometimes days went by where no one saw him at all. And yet, no one thought to ask questions. There were no screaming matches, no slamming doors, no visible bruises, no loud fights echoing through the walls. They were quiet. They were neat. They were together. And maybe that's why no one noticed when the distance between them grew wider than any street they lived on. Tuesday, March 4th, 2025. Temperatures hovered just above freezing. The Hartwells' cul-de-sac was quiet. Trash bins lined the curb. At 6:48 a.m., a neighbor's doorbell camera recorded Emily stepping out her front door. She was dressed for work. Long navy coat, black boots, her school tote slung over one shoulder. She looked over her shoulder twice. At 6:43, she stepped off the porch and walked down the drive. But she didn't make it to her car. There's a blind spot between the Hartwell house and the neighbor's driveway, just enough to obscure what happened next. At 6:48 a.m., the same camera picked up the sound of something dropping. Not a shout, not a cry, just a sudden thud. At 6:50 a.m., Daniel Hartwell emerged from the garage. He was wearing gloves, a dark jacket, no visible signs of panic. He pulled Emily's car into the garage and closed the door behind him. For the next 34 minutes, there is no movement outside the Hartwell residence. At 7:24 a.m., the garage door opened. Daniel backed out in his own car, a silver 2012 Chevrolet Impala. He paused at the end of the driveway, looked both ways, then drove off. At 7:32 a.m.,
Just 8 minutes later, a Brookhaven police officer spotted the vehicle drifting slightly across the center line on Route 14. There was no traffic violation reported, just suspicion. The officer initiated a stop. Dashcam footage shows Daniel pulling over without hesitation. He rolls down the window, speaks softly. No signs of aggression. When asked if everything is okay, he nods. Then, the officer peers into the back seat. At 7:36 a.m., dispatch receives a call for immediate backup. Words used in that call are redacted in the official transcript. The officer's voice is composed, but strained. The body in the back seat was partially wrapped in a wool blanket. Blood had soaked through in places. There were signs of blunt force trauma, mostly to the head and upper neck. The victim showed no signs of life. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Daniel Hartwell was handcuffed and taken into custody without resistance. He didn't ask why he was being arrested. He didn't ask if Emily was okay. He just stared at the ground and said nothing. No visible injuries, no broken windows, no forced entry, no struggle in the yard. Whatever happened to Emily Hartwell that morning happened fast, and it happened quietly. In the months leading up to Emily Hartwell's death, there were changes, small ones, subtle. But when viewed together, they form a pattern that's difficult to ignore. Emily had always been described as consistent, dependable. But starting in late November of 2024, coworkers noticed she had become forgetful. Emails went unanswered. She began arriving late. Her usually crisp appearance, hair done, outfit coordinated, started to slip. She wore the same coat every day. She kept her head down. One teacher, who asked to not be named, recalled seeing Emily crying in her car one morning before school. When approached, she smiled and waved it off, saying it was just allergies. She stopped going out with coworkers on Friday evenings. She declined a holiday dinner invitation she had attended 3 years in a row. Then there were the injuries. Nothing dramatic. A bruise on her wrist, a scrape on her cheek she said was from a fall in the yard. A substitute was called in mid-January after she reportedly tripped over a laundry basket and injured her shoulder. She never filed a medical report. Her family noticed the distance too. Emily's younger sister, Rachel, said their weekly FaceTime calls had become rare. She often canceled last minute. When they did speak, Emily seemed distracted, unwilling to talk about home. Text messages from that period show Emily apologizing frequently. "Sorry, I didn't mean to make things harder. I'll be home before 5. Please don't be upset. I just want to make things better again." In isolation, they sound like normal stress, but when investigators reviewed her phone history after her death, those messages took on a different tone. She had also begun researching rental properties in nearby counties. She didn't tell anyone. No applications were submitted, but she saved 3 listings to her private folder. On January 3rd, she looked up, "What happens if I leave my husband?" 3 days later, she searched signs of emotional abuse in marriage. There were no police reports filed, no protective orders, no visible alarm bells. But in Emily's personal world, beneath the polished exterior, something had shifted. Daniel's behavior changed as well. Coworkers said he became increasingly short-tempered. One employee reported hearing him yell over a conference call before slamming his laptop shut. He stopped showing up to team meetings altogether by February. When asked if everything was okay, he said, "It's fine, just the usual."
A neighbor recalled seeing him in the garage late at night, pacing in circles, talking to himself. Another said he'd started leaving lights on through the night. When asked why, he said it was to keep people away. But the Hartwells had no known threats, no reported break-ins. Still, no one thought to intervene. And on the night of March 3rd, less than 12 hours before her body would be found in the back seat of Daniel's car, Emily texted her sister one last time. "I think I made a mistake. I should have left sooner." It was the last message she ever sent. By 7:50 a.m. on March 4th, the road just off Route 14 was closed. Squad cars formed a perimeter. Bystanders stood at a distance, phones in hand. Emergency responders worked in near silence. Protocol in motion, shock still fresh. Daniel Hartwell had already been placed in the back of a patrol unit. No struggle, no visible signs of distress. He remained quiet, hands folded in his lap, eyes down. The car, his silver Impala, was towed to the Brookhaven police impound facility. There, forensic technicians began their work. The first thing they noted was the smell. Blood and body fluids already beginning to settle. The rear seat was stained. A beige wool blanket covered most of the torso. Beneath it, the body of 36-year-old Emily Hartwell. She was found lying on her right side, arms pucked unnaturally, legs bent. Her coat was soaked through, stiff with dried blood. Her left boot was missing. The injuries were immediately apparent. Blunt force trauma to the back of the skull, multiple contusions around the left temple and orbital bone. One strike had fractured her cheekbone, another had split the scalp. No defensive wounds were found. There were no signs she had tried to run, no bruising on the arms or hands. Investigators later concluded that the attack happened swiftly, possibly from behind. Forensics found blood spatter in the trunk of the vehicle, along with a small wooden hammer, later confirmed to be the murder weapon. It had been placed inside a plastic grocery bag. Fingerprints matched Daniel Hartwell's. No one else's prints were found. Inside the Hartwell garage, another scene began to form. Blood droplets were discovered along the edge of the concrete near the front bumper, likely where Emily collapsed. Smears on the inner door handle, a streak across the drywall. Investigators believe Emily was struck at least once in the garage, then moved to the car. The rest of the blows may have occurred inside the vehicle. No 911 call was ever placed. Daniel never reported an accident, never claimed self-defense. He drove for nearly 10 minutes before being pulled over, heading west toward the highway. When questioned, he didn't ask for a lawyer. He didn't ask how she was. According to the arresting officer, he said only one thing. "I didn't want to do it, but I couldn't stop myself." He was charged that afternoon with second-degree murder and concealment of a corpse. Bail was denied. He was placed on suicide watch less than 12 hours after booking. The news broke by evening. Local stations aired footage of the arrest. Emily's photo appeared on every screen in town. Tributes began appearing outside Westland Elementary by morning. But even as the headlines spread, one question remained unanswered.
Why? After Daniel Hartwell's arrest, detectives began the slow process of reconstructing the 72 hours leading up to Emily's death. His phone was seized, his laptop, both vehicles. The Hartwell home was sealed and processed for evidence. What they uncovered painted a different picture of Daniel than the one neighbors knew. In the weeks leading up to the murder, Daniel had been searching online for terms such as how to make someone unconscious without killing them and minimum prison time for domestic homicide. He had also looked up what happens to a mortgage when one spouse dies. Investigators found recent credit card purchases from hardware stores, gloves, tarps, cleaning solutions, and the very same hammer discovered in the trunk. He bought it 11 days before the murder. His computer revealed multiple visits to Emily's private inbox. He had guessed her password, read emails between her and a real estate agent, a saved draft that she never sent. "I don't feel safe anymore. I think it's time I left." They were signs he'd been reading her text messages as well, through a syncing feature she likely didn't know was active. Detectives believe Emily had been planning to leave for at least 3 weeks, quietly, carefully, but not secretly enough. Daniel's coworkers described him as distracted in recent months, paranoid. One reported that Daniel had broken down during a Zoom meeting and abruptly disconnected. Another said he once said, offhandedly, "If she leaves, I have nothing left." A coworker added, "It didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like a warning." At the Hartwell home, blood was found in the garage and the back seat of Emily's car. Surveillance footage showed no one else entering or leaving the home between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6:45 a.m. The scene was clear. There was no break-in, no forced entry, no intruder. According to prosecutors, Daniel waited for her to leave for work that morning, then intercepted her in the garage. A strike to the head, possibly a second while she was already on the ground. A pause, then a decision. He placed her in the car, drove aimlessly, never called for help. There was no note, no confession, just the quiet decision to keep driving until someone stopped him. When asked again why he did it, Daniel gave no answer, only a stare. His attorney entered a plea of not guilty. But the evidence told a different story, one of control, fear, and silence carried too far. Daniel Hartwell's arraignment was held 2 days after his arrest. The courtroom was packed. Family members, media, and neighbors all gathered to hear the charges. He faced second-degree murder and concealment of a corpse. His defense attorney argued that Daniel was suffering from an acute mental health crisis at the time of the killing, citing a history of anxiety and depression. Prosecutors countered with a timeline of planning and concealment, calling it a deliberate act of violence. The judge denied bail, citing the risk of flight and danger to the community. Public reaction was immediate and intense. Social media pages flooded with condolences for Emily Hartwell, whose quiet life was cut tragically short. A local vigil drew hundreds, holding candles and sharing memories of a woman remembered for her kindness and dedication to her students. The case reignited conversations about domestic abuse, how it can hide behind closed doors, unseen by neighbors and coworkers. It also raised questions about warning signs and whether anyone could have done more to prevent the tragedy. The trial was scheduled for late summer 2025. Until then, the community remained in shock. If you found this story gripping, make sure to like and subscribe for more in-depth true crime stories and investigations. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Share this video with friends who love unraveling real crime mysteries. And if you or someone you know is facing domestic violence, don't hesitate to seek help. There are resources available and you're never alone. Together, let's raise awareness and keep the conversation alive.
In the weeks after Emily Hartwell's death, the town of Brookhaven struggled to understand how something so devastating could happen in their midst. Friends and neighbors spoke of shock, grief, and disbelief. Many admitted they had no idea Emily was suffering or that Daniel was struggling in ways they never saw. Westland Elementary held a memorial assembly, with teachers sharing stories about Emily's warmth and patience, her ability to inspire even the most challenging students. Counselors were brought in to support those affected, children, colleagues, and community members alike. The case also became a catalyst for conversation about domestic violence and mental health, sparking new programs aimed at early intervention and support. Emily's sister, Rachel, spoke publicly, urging others to trust their instincts and speak up if they suspect someone is in danger. She said, "If only we had known. If only she had felt safe enough to ask for help."
Daniel Hartwell remains in custody, awaiting trial. The court proceedings continue to unfold as investigators and legal teams work through the evidence. His fate is yet to be decided. Emily's story is a reminder that darkness can sometimes hide behind the most ordinary faces, and that the warning signs, however small, must never be ignored. Thank you for watching. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, help is available. Reach out, speak out. You are not alone.